Beaten and lost, small groups of Ross tribesmen scattered across the countryside. As they fled north, Marshal Fingal led south, adding the ragged runways to his MacMorgan banner. He spotted Irregular with escort on March the 16th in Athol. She looked dirty, weary and tired. When they met, she hugged him. He hugged her back. She looked such a little thing. When she would speak with authority. But when she felt silent in his arms, Fingal remembered that she was also young, fragile, and a woman. MacMorgan clan, the Troublemakers of Scotland. As we closed to the Kimry border, scouts reported that Ossith was back and was fighting off the Norse in Lothian. Fingal marched his forces forth in a fury to make it to battle. They made it to the town of Stirling on the 22nd, where fighting was taking place, and reinforced Ossith's center. The battle was going evenly before, and the fighting was fierce. The arrival of 200 Highlanders tipped the balance in Allies' favor. The Norse lost their second battle, and the way to retake Outclut was open. In a moon's turn, Fingal's decisive action salvaged the campaign. Meanwhile, the victories in the old kingdom of Outclut shattered the perception of Norse invincibility. The Highlanders in particular set out to raid their pagan neighbors. At first, High Chief Ninian's raiders were seen on Buchan, where even Ninian, the child High Chief, was present on the field. Propped up by his priest in adult's mail, he looked more 13 or 14 instead of 8. Later, core provinces were hit. MacGurrics took on Norse of Orkney. Before it was only MacMorgans who had challenged the Norse on raids, but now MacMorgan's sisters have spread across Scotland, and they were emboldening their husbands to do the same. Meanwhile, at home, Nizam had been charged with heresy by the chaplain, having found out keeping a Quran in secret. The old bishop had an understanding with the Irregular over the chancellor. The new one did not. He knew her mother, not the chiefess, and had no notion of who was off-limits and who was not. In his view, he brought out an infidel into the light, a man the Irregular should have never trusted. In Chiefess' view, he undermined the court she worked so hard to build. The Irregular sent a letter to delay the judgment on the matter until such time as she could be present for the affair. This was akin to letting the man go unpunished, the softest possible outcome for an apostate. The delay did much to harden the priesthood's attitudes towards the chiefess, and settled the matter of where the church taxes should flow. The Highlanders had just settled themselves for a siege, ready to finish this war off. The news came. "The Islander King attacks Scotland!" Commander Stefan said. The news spread throughout camp like wildfire. The clansmen gathered around in a circle, with Ossith's men looking on with worry from afar. The Norse kings found themselves beset on all sides. Their authority in question their hand was forced to respond. King of Jorvik had a rebellion raised against him and was occupied, but King of the Isles, Ivar, set out to retaliate at once. A passionate discussion followed in the camp. "We ought to defend Ross," the Irregular said. "They're not marching on Ross." "Is it Gowrie?" Marshal Fingal asked. "No, they're heading towards Moray." "Moray? But why?" "They're weak." "They're boldest. They are said to be made the example." "Moray or not, all Scots are in danger. My husband was right." The admission took a moment. "The Norse will continue pushing into Scotland. until we take it all. We must defend each other, Moray or otherwise." All agreed they should defend, yet it wasn't so easy to say how. The conflict was fresh and the disposition of forces unclear. Stefan's light foot watched the roads on the province outskirts to assess the situation and determine how we should proceed. The delay was further exasperated by Marshal Fingal's suggestion that they should be done with the current conflict before joining Fight North. "If we let up here, the balance of power might shift again. Had we been decisive before, it may have been over by now, but we must finish this enemy first, or the situation will repeat again." Osid echoed that sentiment, adding, "You're staying in place for now anyway. Might as well commit to staying longer." Nor did Dervorgila wish to abandon her ally. But let no one think the Highlanders were idle or even turned craven during this time of deliberation. While the council heads convened, Stefan's scouts skirmished with the islanders and even won a small victory in Outclut against them. When they first marched south, they took with them warriors. When Fingal came to the rescue, he led green boys with him. Ross was defended by old men at this time, and it made all the difference in making a decision. The tribe had to be defended. They made the decision to go. The tribesmen marched in file away from the siege camp. The Kimri saw them out with uncertainty over their own future. Osid simply looked on in the distance. What he thought we cannot say. God sometimes mocks the plans of mortals, however. On their march back, Dervorgila felt herself full of child. Dervorgila couldn't continue at the head of the war band. She resigned and left command to Fingal with orders to join up with King's forces as soon as able. Dervorgila herself made her way to Ross with her retinue, where it was thought to be safest. A king's man soon appeared with a summons. King Constantine II led a force of 1,500 men in Argyll in an attempt to cut off the mainland forces from an army up north. 1,000 more men were coming from Gowrie, and the Congals were soon to join with 600 more. All in all, 3,500 men would gather in Argyll, among them 300 Highlanders, of which 200 were Rossian and 100 was from Moray. The rest of the Highlanders were cut off from fighting, with Moray being under siege. The king split the command in three. The king himself took command of the left flank, entrusted center to his old commander of a lowborn origin by the simple name of Beefan, and gave the right flank to the head of MacDrostans, whose warriors consisted a third of the full force. A suspicious and erudite man led King Constantine to being a cautious commander. Instead of pursuing Ivar into Moray as Morgan or Hugh might have done, he settled in for a siege. He reasoned that they could take Argyll faster than Ivar would capture the inhospitable highlands in the north. Likewise, Ivar found himself outnumbered in the region, and settled in for a siege of his own. Meanwhile, Dervorgila lay abed in Ross. Her mother, Muriel, took care of her, held by the twins. Dervorgila worried about the future birth and the uncertainty over the situation beyond the palisade walls. Perhaps the very fact made that pregnancy a more difficult one. Though not especially pious, she would find faith when in need, and prayed to Virgin Mary on many occasions. Her mother, an unscrupulous woman, outright told her it was a superstitious folly, and that she should rest instead. Crinan took time off his governing duties and turned up for her as well. Though not especially emotive, having faced tragedies much worse, he proved to be a bedrock nonetheless. While Irregular lay in care and Scots raced against Iva in siege, the Norse of Isle of Man marched against Outclut again. They would fight twice that year. One battle Ossith would win, the other King Run would lose and waste his gains. For his insistence on winning the war himself, they'd call him the Envious King, the Possessed King, and most notably, the Mule. While King Constantine called his vassals, King of the Isles called his friends as well. Chief of Dublin, a powerful Norse warlord who lacked status, came from Ireland with a force 2,000 strong. That threat was far away, however, for King Constantine controlled the straits, and the Norse king's vassals had trouble joining forces. The king had varied of it in his approach. Argyll was taken in full before Moray was. Although Moray tribe settlement did fall, the Bishop of Moray managed to sneak High Chief Ninian and his court away, to hide at Bishopric of Elgin. With their backs secure, the Scots moved in for a fight. Having seen many holy Christian sites converted back into pagan worship, and seeing his local force superiority, ever-pious King Constantine was ever eager to cross swords with the Norse besieging the church. The Battle of Moray was joined on 13th of October, 879. The Scots had superiority in missile troops with 400 archers from Fife and an edge of about 100 light horse. They also boasted a significant advantage in having a wider battle line with 2,000 levy to the 1,000 levy of Norsemen. Despite all these numerous advantages, the Norse had one ace up their sleeve, the famous Huscarls. This personal guard of heavy infantry was the core of Ivar's army, and we are largely responsible of the Norse king's conquest in Ireland. Once melee was joined, they were sure to show their veterancy and make up for the losses during the skirmish phase. It was not meant to be. Autumn rains had made the ground soft and wet, and the Huscarls struggled in their heavy armor with arrows raining down upon them. The lighter Scot infantry moved faster through the Highland hills and kept threatening envelopment, forcing the Huscarls to retreat time and time again, only leading to a partial engagement at times. Retreat turned to rout. Despite some losses, which included Bishop of Fortingall, who died when his heart burst while watching the fighting, the Scottish troops were in high spirits after the battle. They have just dealt a heavy blow to the Norse, with a light cavalry contingent inflicting heavy casualties on the pursuit. 10 Norse were struck down for 1 Scot, and a third of the Norse army lay either dead or wounded. The supporting army from Dublin came too late to help their king. With him defeated, they could no longer contest territories within the Scottish kingdom. The only remaining force left was the garrison occupying the Moray settlement. They resisted siege for a time, but once they saw that the Dublin army would retreat back into Ireland and that no one was coming to relieve them, they promptly surrendered. It was said that when the news of the victory reached Ross, Irregular felt so relieved that she promptly went into labor. Or perhaps it was simply that 9 months have passed since the start to the fighting. Whatever the case, the pregnancy bore no complications, and she had a healthy girl that winter. They named her Donella. Irregular changed her stance drastically upon recovery. A close shave with danger in the field of battle transformed her. Previously a faithful dove, she transformed into one of the most ardent of the hawks. I was never good at it, being a warrior, but I have to become one now, for the sake and safety of MacMorgan clan. This is what's required of me. Irregular's change of heart brought her into her husband's side of the argument, and the birth of her second child brought the two ever closer. He and his faction came in strong support for Irregular, but not everyone was as pleased by this proclamation. You could never hold a sword. Has so much time went by that you've forgotten. Become a warrior, she will. Huh, she scoffed. "My husband spoke of same," she reminded her. The two women quarreled. With Scotland secured, King Constantine had two options. He could capture Ivar's seat on the Isles to cut the snake's head off, or pursue him into Ireland instead. In Ireland, the Norse King's vassals held sway, and the coast was less known as well as more treacherous. The Isles were undefended, but likewise held their own risks. For one thing, they would take the army out of its strategic position and leave Scotland open to attack. It would also give the enemy more time to muster. The enemy, now bolstered by the locals, Norse settlers, and having merged with the army from Dublin, gathered an impressive host. That became the deciding factor in choosing the safer course for now, avoiding the Norse and mounting an attack on the Isles instead. When the Rus tribals came to the Isles with Morgan and Irregular, they came to plunder. Under King Constantine, for the first time, though few in number, they came not as raiders, but as conquerors. Though good staging ground, the Isles were mostly barren rocks and offered little nourishment, especially in winter. They were difficult to resupply by boat, and for every man they could feed, were there two that they could not. As the king's men hopped from one rock to another, they kept being harassed by Stornovik's garrison, whom they had plenty of reason to avenge for plundering their own town 4 years prior, and they attacked in fervor. The army split up into smaller and smaller groups. They headed east and south toward greener pastures of the mainland. The supply lines were already cut off. The greater Norse host had taken position in Moray. They only had to sit and wait, picking off the pieces of King Constantine's army one by one as they arrived. Though it seemed sensible at the time, the timing of the campaign turned it into a disaster. The Second Battle of Moray was as one-sided as any in the war. Though she swore to be restless in restoring peace to the highlands, the Irregular was in a precarious situation in the year of 880. The Norse at Norknow felt emboldened and attacked her sister's lands to the north. King Run had just lost a key fight to the south, had his sons and grandsons seen taken prisoner, and the greater Norse host besieged Moray with no opposition. King Constantine's army had been reduced by a third on the Isles.